Hello and welcome to the NVR Podcast, Series 2, Episode 23. My name is Rachael Aylmer.
And I'm Peter Jakob, speaking from a cold office.
You ad-libbed. Yeah. And today we're talking about when cases are tough. We're not talking about the weather. We're going to be talking about when cases are tough. We always have a preamble before we press record, and as per usual, how did we get to this topic today, Peter?
Well, it started really with how I have been feeling in regard to a particular case, a particular family I've been working with. Where things are difficult. Working with them, with NVR, for various reasons, not because of the parents really, but actually it's because of other factors, other agencies involved and so on. Things are simply difficult. And I've been thinking a lot about my own emotional response to that.
Yeah. We were talking about people's caseloads, weren't we, just before we started, and about how there is that risk of practitioners feeling overwhelmed with their caseload, and sometimes when cases aren't going well. But we were talking earlier about how we tend not to have that experience so much because NVR supports families in a really deep, meaningful way, and we do see change really
Absolutely.
quickly.
And I remember, going back quite a long time, when the received wisdom was you should only have a very, limited number of cases that in some shape or form deal with violence, abuse, and so forth in your caseload, because otherwise you would get burned out, you would get vicariously traumatized and so forth. And I've always felt, well, using approaches and having at my disposal ways of working that are productive, that sort of gives me a sense of agency. I feel, the psychological term for that is an internal locus of control. I feel I can do things. And they're not just the world isn't just happening to me. And so I've never felt burnt out. I've never felt that I'm suffering from vicarious traumatization. But when there is a case that is difficult, that sense of agency may not be there. And that's what sort of set me off thinking a lot about, how do I look after myself? How do I preserve my well-being in the face of a case where, I really feel very much for the family members, and, there's a certain emotional investment in that. How do I look after myself and my responses, and what position do I need to take in order to feel good enough? I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, it does. And I'm then thinking, how do you then? How do you?
How do you? I was going to ask you. How do you?
Well, my cases go really well, so I never have that problem.
Oh, I see. Okay. You've just made me feel so much better, Rachel.
You're welcome. Well, how do I? I think all of the obvious around peer supervision and regular supervision and reflection on our ethos, principles, practice, efficacy. Check it. I think one of the key things is checking in with the family. That if, let's define what's working well, or let's define good outcomes. I may feel that the outcomes aren't maybe quick enough, or I might feel frustrated that change isn't coming about, and despite the coaching, despite the regular sessions, But actually, families might feel that things are improving just enough to shift change, and checking in with them is really important.
And of course, that particularly when your way of approaching such difficulties is more solution oriented, that is a very helpful thing for them and for us. For us to feel, okay, there are some things that we're doing that are really productive, and we are on the right track with those things. We can also look at what may not be so productive and ditch that. But to get that reassurance, is that what you're saying? That's some reassurance as well.
Yeah, I had a session with a family this morning, and they said, there's been an improvement with a reduction of violent behaviour, but also there hasn't. So they had what they described as some small wins and some losses.
Yeah,
and then used the language that said things aren't perfect. And so we kind of sat with that word for a bit.
Yeah.
Let's explore what does perfect look like, and, the reality of that. And of course, I knew they use that word loosely. We do. We use terms loosely. They're not seeking perfection. And I don't even know what that means in real life. But they are experiencing a reduction of violence from their young person. So that's the win.
But I think, I know that I know that they don't actually mean perfection literally when they say things are not perfect. But it does raise, to my mind, a lot of questions about what is success and what do we view as success.
Yeah.
And what do we view as failure? And is not success and failure in certain ways perhaps an unhelpful binary opposition, in our way of approaching it? Because things are, I often say to parents, he hasn't turned a corner because there aren't any corners. There is no turning corners. There is no certain point at which something so powerful happens that the difficulties just disappear. It's an ongoing struggle. Work with NVR is an ongoing struggle. And there's a certain arc to that struggle often. There's certain stages that people move through. But I was sort of thinking, sometimes the kind of outcomes that the parents would wish for, that we would wish for, when they don't happen, what is success then? And I was sort of thinking about something that Chaim Omer said one time, and he said, someone asked him whether you could do NVR with a certain kind of difficulty or diagnosed disorder and so forth. And he said, how could you not resist? How could you want to be violent? So nonviolent resistance is always appropriate. Always. And I think there's an important principle embedded in that. So there is something valuable about the resistance to harmful behavior because it's right. It's right to resist harmful behavior, even if it doesn't mean, for a variety of reasons. Say young person is deeply entrenched in gang activity. It can be very difficult to have an influence on them when there's such powerful peer influence. And I also remember Chaim Omer talking about a case where there was gang involvement, and he saw the parents just every few months, but for many, many, many years. It was until the young man was in his late 20s and had or mid 20s and had outgrown the risk and had outgrown his affiliation. which is very different from the original 10 session plus telephone calls model, Chaim Omer's own 10 session model, So there's something about, I think it is valuable because it's right. I don't know. Does that make sense at all? Or am I?
Yeah, totally. It's that kind of position that you choose to take and you stand against, because going with it is wrong. So it's just the complete opposite of what you said. Going with it is morally so wrong.
Yeah.
You stand against it because morally that's so right to do. Yeah. Naturally, that is what you want to do.
I just had a session with a foster carer who, last time we spoke, she'd spoken about her sense of failure, that she's not doing enough.
Something else like it.
And
sorry,
was your phone commenting?
I watched. You watched why?
And we talked about that, and we talked about the pressure she's putting herself under, And today we spoke again, and she said, "Oh, the pressure's gone," because I asked her how the last session may have been useful to her, and she said, "Well, very useful because the pressure's gone." And I said, "Well, how's that? How come the pressure is gone? That self-inflicted pressure and the feeling of guilt?" And she said, "Well, I've come to realize that I'm doing as best I can."
Mm.
And she sort of said, "Well, responding to the child in these ways, that is what gives me the sense that I'm doing the best I can." And I think that's important for her, isn't it? And ultimately, she's my client, not the child. The child is a beneficiary, but she's my client. And if perhaps in other cases, actually in this case, the kids' behaviors are very good now, but if in other cases, the child's behavioral change lags behind, isn't there merit in the foster carer, in the parent, feeling better in and of themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And their best is good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we've just finished some training yesterday, and it's interesting when we talk through the process of a sit-in, the responses that some practitioners get, that we receive from them, which is still very child-centered, and that there's some discomfort by practitioners coaching parents to sit with children to resist harmful behaviours, and a fear of the practitioner almost putting the parents in the lion's den, the discomfort of practitioners coaching parents to sit with their, in some cases, violent, hostile, aggressive young people. And I still marvel at those responses, and marvel at the alternative then. So the alternative is to not resist. And going back to that moral right and wrong, surely it's right to resist these harmful behaviours, whatever they may be.
As a parent, I felt I didn't do what I could have, or I did nothing. That would be really problematic for me.
But you may not do anything because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And we coach parents to explore what they can do in their efforts to resist. And so what we find are parents' responses when they resist is taking action, which then enables them to feel empowered and connected to their child, to themselves, to their partners, to their other children. And the knock-on effect by resisting is so much greater than not resisting.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Is it so ingrained in us. This is the only logical way to address harmful behaviour.
Mm.
You know, my colleague Jackie and I were saying that yesterday. And we're just so NVR now that we have no other insight
Really?
into to address these behaviours.
I guess we're sort of going off topic a little bit, but I just want to say that we can practice NVR as a broad church of ideas, can't we? You know, as long as we uphold those underlying principles and find creative ways to use the key methods that parents use, both in reaching out to their child and reconnecting, and in resisting harmful behavior, and in protecting their child. As long as we have that core, we can invite loads of different ideas and thoughts, but I think at the core is really this sense of doing what the parent doing what they can do with our support. And even if all we see at first is that it's good for the parent, that is very important.
It's same. Practitioner despondency when cases are tough and you don't feel things are shifting, moving, changing. Whereas parents are working hard with their young person, with their family, to bring about change, and change isn't coming in spite of their best efforts and their hard work. And it's same. It's, you know, that we come across cases that are tough and difficult, and change is slower, and we have to reach out into different corners to find our strengths to continue to support parents, and parents equally have to find those external measures to help them keep going, to help them find their strength when home life is tough and they're not seeing or witnessing the change that they want to see.
And of course, in most of our cases, we see the change not just in the parental response to harmful behavior, but we actually see harmful behavior declining. We see young people becoming happier. We see them, thriving more, or addressing their difficulties. If there are internal emotional difficulties or social difficulties, we see them cooperating more. So we see all that happening, and actually at a very high rate. And we see very few parents dropping out of our work. So in a sense, maybe we need to cultivate in ourselves that particular attitude of learning to live without seeing immediate results in a certain area, that parents need to have as well. And if we can cultivate that in ourselves, then we can probably help parents best to cultivate that in themselves.
Yeah. Nice summary, really. I don't know what else really to add to that, other than, I think just holding on to the essence of introducing these principles, and parents working with it and hoping for change, and change might come.
Yeah.
In abundance or in drips.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. A couple of footnotes. I just wanted to mention to those who might be listening to this podcast that I'm stepping away from here now.
Which is so sad.
No longer being a part of this podcast. And I'm handing over to my lovely colleague, Shila Desai.
Which is lovely.
Yes, and Jill Lubienski. They're going to be stepping into these size 6s and hosting with Peter for the next series 3 in the new year. Aside to that, we just want to remind those listeners that we have got an exciting workshop being rolled out next spring with Eli Lebowitz, who's coming over from the US to deliver the space model for 2 days in London and a further 2 days in Birmingham. Dates can be found on our website, partnershipprojectsuk.com. And in addition to that, there is an NVR Association workshop / conference in spring, 4th of March. It will be online. So please go on the NVRA website to find more information out about that.
And Rachel, I know that you'd like to skim over this, but I just want to emphasize how privileged I feel to have been able to do this with you, how much fun I've had doing this with you, and how enriching it has been.
It's been great. We've had a couple of boobs, haven't we? But we haven't completely made a hash of it. No, it's been lovely working with you too, Peter. And I know that people listen to these podcasts very avidly, and I'm sure that they'll enjoy them, hopefully just as much, or be glad to hear the back of my voice and my wit.
Probably not, but yes, there are very worthy people stepping in your shoes.
Yes, but the good news is Peter Jakob remains, so I'm sure that's what really counts. But anyway, so it is a final farewell. It's a final goodbye from me,
and a goodbye for this year, and happy holidays to all of you, and a happy new year, and see you again, or hear you again, or you will hear us again for the next series of the NVR Podcast.
We're so seasoned at this. Happy Christmas. Bye.
Bye.